Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, the show trying to make the world safe for ADHDers. I'm a clinical psychologist. Actually, I'm a neuropsychologist, which means I went to school even a little bit more after my PhD. And I am also the parent of an ADHD. He's an adult now, but the fun never ends. And I'm also in private practice. I have right around 40 years of experience working with ADHD, even before, when we didn't call it ADHD. And today, I'd like to talk to you about one of the things that you probably do unconsciously, but it still is a problem. Okay? ADHD is a neurologic condition. Okay? Actual difficulties with the neurotransmitters in the brain, primarily dopamine and norepinephrine, are either they're not produced in as to get as big a quantity or as large a quantity as is typical, or that metabolizes faster. 6 of one, half a dozen of another, but same kind of deal. The net is that you have this lower level of the dopamines that basically help you pay attention and help you with executive functions and feeling satisfied that you finished the job kind of things. Those are all part of your neurotransmitters. So it's neurologic. It isn't something that was developed as a result of some kind of birth trauma, and it isn't something that is controlled by diet particularly, and it isn't something that you grow out of. And that's probably the big thing. You don't grow out of it. You have it your whole life. The problem you have as a parent is that we were all parented by people who basically, probably didn't know a lot about how to do it, and were probably scared to death of us. And probably, if you're as old as I am, you're probably a little younger, but there was a lot more emphasis on force, fear, and punishment than discipline, spare the rod and spoil the child and all that other stuff. Okay? The other thing, and most of the time, those of us who are neurotypical tended to, we at least weren't going to challenge somebody who had that much power over us. And so parenting was a little closer to, you do the same thing your parents do, works out the same way with a neurotypical kid. With an ADHDer, it's not gonna, okay? An ADHDer, well, one of the biggies, in addition to the usual things with inattention and impulsivity, is that their maturity level's about 3 years behind their peers, okay? So they aren't social, emotionally as mature as their peer group, and they don't grow out of it. They still have it when they're 40, okay? Doesn't show quite as extreme, but they still have it, and they still have problems as a result of that. So you just doing the same kind of parenting that your parents did, unless they were extraordinary, and you were the ADHD child, probably is not going to work very well, okay? You have to be flexible. You have to be somebody who recognizes that the usual things I do with maybe his or her brother or sister don't seem to be working with this kiddo. So I got to do something different. You have to adapt and adjust, because your kid is going to be ADHD his or her whole life. And that doesn't mean that they can not succeed. Matter of fact, there are a large number of ADHD people who are extremely successful. I routinely give out this whole list in my office And, I mean, it's quite an impressive list of people who have been extremely successful in spite of their ADHD. And some even suggest that it's because of their ADHD that they're so successful. That's a whole different thing to get into. We probably won't get at that now, but the big deal for you as the parent of an ADHD child is that you've got to understand punishing won't work. Punishing will not. Punishing will make things worse. Okay, you have a child who, I say this every week, who receives approximately 70 critical comments per day. Now think about that. 70. That's a whole bunch of criticisms. But it's a neurologic condition. It's not a behavior problem. It's not like they're willfully deciding they're going to do this stuff. It's that the brain works in such a way that the things are, maybe the neurotypical folks take for granted, like being in school all day and having to sit still and be quiet and pay attention and all that stuff. That's stuff that isn't going to happen for them, that they just are not going to be able to do that. Short of redesigning the schools, which honestly I highly recommend, you've got to figure out compensatory strategies. That's the big deal. You've got to figure out ways that you can get some kind of performance out of them that will get them moving towards at least the academic goals. You need them to graduate from high school at a minimum. But you want them to get through it and to have a positive self-image and some self-confidence, and, some resilience. And that's where it gets difficult, because there are going to be times where you're going to be frustrated. There is no doubt about it. Or you're going to be scared. What is going to happen with this kid, and so on. So you have to figure out what is the way that's not maybe the traditional way of parenting that you have to get into. And a lot of times, frankly, it's setting up structures. ADHDers do really well in environments that are structured. So your home has to be structured, has to have routines that you follow. This is when we eat breakfast. This is when we eat dinner. On the weekend, this is when we eat lunch. This is our routine for getting to bed. This is our routine for getting up in the morning. All of these things. This is when we do homework. And this is how we do homework. Those are all things that you have to set up the routines for. And you train them in the structure. And they learn to follow the structure. And, when I get around to teaching this course that I've got in mind, we'll also talk about compensatory strategies, because that's terribly important. Executive functioning, and by that I mean things like attention, focus, concentration, working memory, those sorts of things. They're automatic kinds of things. Well, if they aren't automatic for you, you have to figure out ways to compensate. You have to figure out ways to still get the job done with your own unique mind, with the way your brain works. And so that means you got to make some changes. And as a parent, that means you've got to do a lot of investigation. Okay, I mean, and this is a big question, okay? And I'm a neuropsychologist, and I think it's a big question. So for some of you, it's going to be, oh my God, how does his or her brain work? What are the strengths, the interests? There are probably some natural talents. What are those? You need to know those. You need to understand, like my ADHD child was always making things. You give him a ballpoint pen, a couple of rubber bands, some other things, tape, I guess, I don't know. And he will be able to shoot the refill for that pen across the room pretty soon. Just if you have an ADHD child and you're always finding things that are made out of paper clips and rubber bands and stuff like that, that's telling you something. Okay? This is a kid who's a kinesthetic learner, or visual spatial, either one, but sees stuff and sees things, potential for it, that most of us don't see. Oh, that's just a paperclip. What are you doing? Kind of thing. You've got to pay attention to that. Maybe your child will end up being an artist, maybe an engineer, although the schooling for that is a little bit difficult, shall we say, for an ADHDer particularly. But the whole thing, okay, you're probably wondering, my son ended up somehow being a jewelry designer. I have no idea how. We have no family history of anybody who's ever been a jeweler or, done any of that kind of stuff. But just, he decided first of all, he liked crystals. And then he liked gems, semi-precious stones, and, one thing grew to another. And it's like, oh, I didn't, that's not what most of the people in my family have ever done. But it is perfectly acceptable. And it's a whole lot easier if you accept the strength you first are aware of and observe and pay attention to them. And then that you don't have some plan in your head mapped out that this is what he's going to do or she's going to do. And they're all going to go to law school or they're all going to go and be accountants, or you've got to give up some of that because they're not going to follow the family plan most of the time. Sometimes they will. I had one young man who was both ADHD and dyslexic, and he wanted to go to law school. Now, I would have told him, if they'd asked me earlier, that this is probably the worst selection of careers that you could make. You have to sit quietly for long periods of time, because he wasn't going to be a trial lawyer. Okay, those guys, a lot of them have ADHD, but to sit and read that complicated legal jargon hour after hour and make interpretations and that sort of stuff, that's just not what I would have picked for an ADHDer with dyslexia. But his daddy did it, his grandpa did it, and by God, he was going to do it. And so he did. He was motivated. But generally, that's not the best plan unless there's a whole lot of heavy family pressure behind the following in that path. I don't recommend it, but hey, he's doing okay. I just don't know if he's happy. He's not my patient anymore. He's my ex-patient. So anyway, the deal though, the big deal that we're talking about is you have to be flexible. You have to be a talented observer, and you have to actually spend some time, what's he doing? How's he filling his time? How's she filling her time? What is she thinking about? What are his or her strengths and abilities? And how do we develop those? And not so much, God, what's he gonna? Is he gonna go to college? Is she gonna have a career? What are we gonna do? I know it's slightly terrifying, but it's you've got to be you've got to adjust and adapt, as I said before. Probably my two favorite words, and because Basically, that's all there is, Stuff comes, life is a series of problems to be solved. And you have to adapt and adjust to those, Whatever happens in your family, whatever happens in your life, you have to adapt and adjust to it. Okay, having an ADHD child is one of those things you've got to adapt and adjust to. And it's a little more vital in those situations because this is a kid who's under a lot of pressure. And I told you, 70 critical comments every day. Holy cow. Okay, that's what I got for today. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass. This is Dr. G's ADHD Chat show. We're trying to make the world safe for ADHDers because, we kind of need those people. We need those outside the box thinkers, the ones who look at stuff and say, oh, you could do this with that. I wonder why nobody tried that before. Well, that's because neurotypical thinkers are really good at sustaining the situation as it is. They're not always so good at seeing other options and problem solving in a unique way. That's why we need some ADHDers in the mix. Okay, I will catch you next week. My website is terrygingrassphd.com. Lots of goodies on there. And if you've got questions, or please think of questions if you don't have, and write them down here somewhere, and I will make it my lifelong duty to answer those. Okay. And also, if you have ideas for topics you'd like me to cover, please do. Okay, thank you, and we will catch you next time.